Future learners. I'm Robert Jones. You may recognise me from the films, and I'm sure you also recognise my colleague Peter Schmidt-Hansen. We are today at the University of East Anglia in Norwich in the UK, where Peter and I teach a one-year course on brand leadership, out of which the Future Learn course, The Secret Power of Brands, has sprung. So we are here for the next 45 minutes to answer any questions that you would like to send in about branding. And a little bit later on, I'm going to take you behind the scenes of the course that we teach here. And very excitingly, we've got a couple of the students who are currently doing the full-time course here who are going to join. So if you want to ask them any questions, then they would be very happy to answer them as well. You can ask questions by commenting on this step 4.2 on the course. You can also email questions to brandleadership@uea.ac.uk, but probably the simplest way is simply to tweet your questions using the hashtag behind me, FLBrands. So that's probably the simplest thing. Tweet your questions, please, using the hashtag FLBrands. And we're ready now to start answering anything that you want to throw at us. We have one question already from Sarah, who says, we have celebrities who endorse products with their names, but with the rise in social media, do you think there's a rise in the general public marketing themselves, their thoughts, their ideas, and effectively turning themselves into brands? So is every individual becoming a brand? Peter, what do you think about that?
Well, certainly it makes that thing very much more possible. We're seeing a huge rise of bloggers, and bloggers have got incredible influence these days. When people are buying brands, they often want to listen not so much to the brands themselves, who might be perceived as having a biased view, but independent people who are blogging about, say, fashion or food. And those bloggers, they get a large number of followers these days and have got considerable influence. And it's not beyond the realms of possibility that those bloggers eventually get adopted by the brands themselves and end up with paying jobs. So yes, I mean, social media democratizes the space that was once owned by brands.
Mm-hmm. And some bloggers and some video bloggers, I think vloggers in particular, have become brands themselves, haven't they? They have as much power and authority as the brands themselves.
Absolutely, yeah, very much so. And it's not difficult to go online and actually find these people, and they might have followers in the tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands.
So later on in week 6, we're going to be talking about personal branding and how to create your own personal brand, which is probably not that different conceptually from creating a corporate brand. But we will go into that a bit more deeply in week 6. So there's another question. This is a nice, short, simple, but not necessarily easy question. Is branding as important in B2B marketing as it is in B2C? So is it as important in business to business as it is in business to consumer, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, branding is important, whichever field you're looking at branding, whether it's B2C, B2B, whether it's celebrity branding, whether it's country branding, whether it's branding of religion, whether it's branding of ideas or charities. Branding is equally important in all spheres, because essentially it is about producing a clear position and communicating that in a way that people understand and engage with. So although we often think about branding in the B2C, business to customer or business to consumer field, it is equally important in business to business. Now, of course, the decision-making process in business to business is perhaps slightly different from the decision-making process in B2C. When you're buying a product, you could, for example, argue that businesses are less emotional. You could argue that they're more rational, that they have certain purchasing routines which perhaps take out some of the emotion in terms of the relationship. But that doesn't make it any less important I mean, although businesses could perhaps be seen as being less emotional, there is still a lot of emotion, and there's a lot of relationships between businesses, and really good business-to-business brands. They recognize this, and they use the same principles that you would use in a B2C relationship. So it's about being authentic. It's about understanding your customer. It is about providing a product or a service which means something to them. It's about communicating that well. So I think all the principles are equally important.
The buyer in the end is still a human being.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah.
I mean, I often think at Wolf Ownings, a lot of our work is for B2B clients as opposed to B2C. And in a way, our attitude in Wolf Ownings has always been, strangely enough, a little bit anti-corporate. We are in favour of corporations talking to human beings as human beings rather than using stuffy corporate language. And I think a lot of B2B marketing is too rational and too stuffy and too pompous and too stilted, to be honest. I mean, if I ever see another advert for a B2B brand with a picture of a man in a suit shaking the hand of another man in a suit, I will tear it up, because the cliches are so predictable. And we just did something for a B2B brand called AECOM, which is a design and engineering business, who have very clever ideas about making the environment better. And we created a campaign, and which is just up for an award, actually. And one of the adverts, this is a B2B brand, one of the adverts is a picture of a tree with the headline, "This is a sewer." And the point of the advert is that what AECOM does, instead of digging more tunnels to take away rainwater, is to plant more trees, because they capture the water in a much more effective way. So if you can be, I think, witty and provocative and a little bit mysterious and so on, just as effectively in B2B as in B2C, and I think you should do.
And in fact, I mean, when we go to work, whatever field we're in, we actually want to have fun. I mean, yeah, good business, serious business can be fun as well. Yeah. And the most fun we get is by building relationships with other people. Yeah. And it's that human-to-human interaction, which is important. Yeah.
Well, I hope, Steve, that answers your question. And the answer to your question is yes, it absolutely is just as important in B2B. We have a question from Carol, who says, here's an interesting question: what's the most cost-effective way for a small one-person business startup to create a brand? With, I think, the emphasis here on cost-effective. Any thoughts, Peter?
Well, obviously, in terms of cost effectiveness, it's a matter of getting people to talk about you. And with social media, as we were discussing a few minutes ago, it's actually much easier to get your message out there. So using social media is certainly important. But I think the real key is to have a brand which has a very distinctive space and occupies a distinctive space, which is something that no one else is doing. If we take, for example, The Body Shop, a huge global brand, when that was started by Anita Roddick, she had one shop in Brighton. She didn't advertise, but word of mouth spread about The Body Shop, saying this is a wonderful concept, it's something that we're unused to, it had a wonderful brand personality, it was different, it was anti-corporate, it was sort of diametrically opposite of anything that the cosmetics industry stood for at that time. So it occupied a very distinctive space, and through word of mouth, she was able to open another shop, and then another shop, and another shop after that. So I think the first requirement is the requirement of all good branding, is to have a distinctive space and something which means something to the world. Once you've got that, you've got to get people talking about you. And there are many ways of doing that. You can use social media to promote what you're doing and to drive people to engage with your brand. But you can also be generous. And I think there are many cost-effective ways of being generous. You can try and approach these influential bloggers who might be talking in your particular market area, whether it's food, for example. I mean, there's a lot of very influential food bloggers, and if you've got a little food business which is doing something which no one else is really doing, or doing what other people are doing but just doing it better, invite those bloggers or vloggers into your brand, and be generous in your spirit.
So generosity is the thing. I think my experience of startups is that most startups don't even think about brand, do they? They think of a name for themselves, and that's about as far as it goes. And it's only a year later or a couple of years later that they start to think, well, now that we've got this business going, what is it that we stand for? And it tends to need, once they get to a size where they are recruiting more people who need to understand what the business is about, that's when they start to tend to start defining their brand.
So I think that's probably the most common route to starting a business, but occasionally you do get someone who's got this amazing idea about how to do business, and it's more about an ethos and an approach. And sometimes they want to apply that ethos or approach to a business. It doesn't really matter whether it's a food business or whether it's a service business, but they've just got this idea that they want to do something in the world, and it springs from the ethos.
And we discovered that ourselves earlier this year. In Wolf Olins, we created a startup called Kitchen, which is a little kind of practical school of branding and creativity. And for a while, it was going to be called Wolf Olins Academy, which is a pretty boring name. And then we landed on the name Kitchen. The idea being that if you imagine Wolf Olins as a restaurant, then Kitchen takes you behind the scenes of the restaurant and shows you the recipes. But for us, the important thing about it was not the name; it was the ethos, the whole spirit that the name suggested. That this would not be the kind of school where there is an expert at the front lecturing. It would be more like everyone sitting around a kitchen table, and you'd be making something, and you might get messy in the way that you do in a kitchen. And I think the value of that little bit of branding that we did, it only took about half an hour, was that it pinned down the ethos of the thing that we were trying to create, made it much easier to communicate it to other people. So I think startups, of course we're going to say this, but startups should think about branding earlier. Than they usually do.
Yeah, very much so. And then, of course, as you're discovering on the course at the moment, branding is about doing many small things very well. And if you get all of those small things done correctly, there's a good chance that your brand can do well. But get one of those small things wrong, and the whole brand can collapse and crumble.
Okay, well, it's 12 minutes past the hour. This is a live webinar for future learners on the Secret Power of Brands course. I'm Robert, this is Peter from UEA. We are very keen to answer your questions. The simplest way to ask them is to tweet them using the hashtag you can see behind me, FL Brands. So please do send those questions in. If you have a startup yourself and want to follow up on Carol's question, then please do. And we also have a couple of the students from the full-time course that we teach here at UEA who are going to join us in a minute. Happy to answer your questions about the full-time course. We have a question from Terence. Do you believe with the rise of instant social communication, the encouragement of comments and reviews of services and products, is there a way to protect a brand from the general wave of negativity that seems to inhabit the internet? Can you protect yourself from corporate trolls, I guess?
It is a problem these days. We've got this thing called the tyranny of transparency, that everyone knows everything about your business already. So I think the principles are just to behave in a very good manner. Keep your nose clean. Do everything correctly. Act above board. Don't try and hide things. And inevitably things will go wrong. There's no brand that exists that's not had problems in one way or another. But when things go wrong, it's how you deal with them that's the important thing. If people can see that you're open, honest, genuine, and you want to do well with your brand, and when things do go wrong, you want to correct it, and you hold up your hands and say, okay, we got it wrong, then I think people can have more empathy with you. I think when things really go wrong is when organizations try and cover up that there's been a mistake or try and blame someone else. And that's when you get the negative comments on social media and people start criticizing your company. But if they see that you're being honest, that you own up to mistakes having taken place, and that you are taking the business and the brand in a better direction as a result of the mistakes that have happened, then I don't think there's a problem. But of course, we must remember that not everyone likes your brand. The classic case is, of course, Marmite. And Marmite made a big thing about that. People actually hate their brand. That's probably not quite the thrust of your question, but I think it was Oscar Wilde who once said, "There's only one thing worse than people saying bad things about you, and that's people not saying anything about you at all." So I think brands have to be confident, they have to be bold, they have to be honest, they have to be open. And if you are those four things, then I don't think there's any reason why any negative publicity should stick for a long period of time.
I think brands are like people, aren't they? That you get a lot of kudos from being honest.
Yes.
And from apologising.
Yes.
Two of the hardest things in life to do, of course.
Absolutely.
But you do get a lot of, and that's why I suppose you get kudos from it.
I think so, yeah. And it's got to come from the top. I think this is the other important thing about all aspects of branding, that branding must inhabit the whole company, but it's got to be led from the top of an organisation. And there have been a number of very well publicised cases over the years where a company has had a particular problem with a product or a service, and the chief executive has not come out straight away and said sorry. They've perhaps tried to blame suppliers, they've tried to blame other companies, they've tried to blame the media, they've sent out people further down in the organisation. But if the chief exec really believes in the brand and really believes in the customers, the chief exec should be prepared to stand up there and, as you said, say sorry, you got it wrong. And then, people empathise with that.
Although one of the fascinating things about social media, of course, is that the tweeting is usually done by somebody very junior.
Yes.
And suddenly companies have got really relatively junior people who are acting as their voice.
People,
and I remember a couple of months ago tweeting something slightly sniffy about Audi dealerships. I had a very uninspiring visit to an Audi dealership, and almost immediately somebody from Audi came back with probably a standard message saying, if there's any way that we can help you, something like that. And it would have been nicer if it had said something like, sorry you didn't enjoy your visit, something a little bit more personal. Because given that the tweeting is being done by an individual, I think a brand has permission to be quite personal in the way that it responds.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and I think also you've hit on something there. It's the speed of response as well, which is really important. And if you leave things, then there is the opportunity for momentum to build up. And people pile in with negative comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Let's take another question from Lynn, who's asking, is internal brand activation a must-have for any brand project? So have you got to get to the employees first?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. I think branding begins at home. People who work in the organisation, work in the brand, they have to believe in the brand because they are your spokespeople. They might not necessarily have frontline communications with your customers, but they actually, their efforts go into building the products or services that you're offering to people. So one of the key aspects of being an authentic brand is to love the doing. And of course, what you really want is for people to come into work in the morning with a spring in their step, and if they believe in the brand and they believe that what you're doing is good and they take pride in their work, they will come into work with a spring in their step. There's nothing worse than forcing someone to come into work for 8 hours or more in the office if they really want to be somewhere else. So inculcating people into the brand and getting them to believe in it and support it is hugely important because it helps to drive forward the business. People like that are also more likely to give their most creative ideas during the day then, because it's something that they want to do and they feel valued, they feel treasured, they feel they're contributing to the growth of the brand. And, being honest about it, they're more likely to stay a bit later in the afternoon and perhaps come in a bit earlier, not worry about it because they feel they're working for something that they really believe in.
And certainly in Wolf Olins, I guess what we're most famous for in Wolf Olins is logos and things like that. But that's the absolute tip of an iceberg in a branding project, and probably 95% of the time that we put into a branding project is actually spent one way or another. I don't know whether activating is the right word, but getting people inside the business involved in, excited about understanding the brand so that they can deliver on it. And I think there's a change is happening in how that is done, because not long ago it used to be thought that if you were clear enough about your company and what it stood for, and if you explained that to as many people as possible forcefully enough, then somehow magically they would all behave exactly in line with the brand. And I think there's an increasing realization that employees are not that obedient anymore. We come to work with our own values and our own beliefs. And I think what we're increasingly finding with our clients is ways that they can help their employees identify their own ambitions and beliefs and find a place where they map onto the corporate ambitions and beliefs, rather than trying to pretend that just because something is written down as a company value, everybody in the company is going to automatically believe in it. I think you have to find common ground between the company and the individual, which is a bigger, harder task.
Yeah. And of course, the world, the business world, everything in the world is changing much more quickly than it was 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Absolutely.
So actually what you really want is a very fluid and flexible organisation which values individuals, because they're the ones who can move around and come up with ideas, rather than having this sort of rather static corporate structure which doesn't allow sort of movement. So valuing the individual, as you were saying, and allowing them to find their space within the organisation and valuing their contribution makes for a much more dynamic and creative organisation.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, we're 22 minutes past the hour now. If any of you have any more questions to ask, then please do. Simplest thing is just to tweet them using the hashtag behind me. So if there are any more, and there are some more, okay, thank you very much. We're going to answer a couple more questions, and then we're going to bring in a couple of students from the brand leadership course here at UEA. Peter, you got one there.
Right, this is one here from Eleanor in London. This is about the brand course itself.
Okay, we'll come to that in a moment.
Right. Right, so there's one here from Lynn. If rethinking brand is meant to rebuild commitment, why does it mean new proposition, not purpose?
Gosh, that's a very detailed question.
If rethinking brand is meant to rebuild commitment,
yes,
why does it mean a new proposition, not purpose?
Yes. Okay, well, and you're talking about one of the steps in week 2, I think, here. Good question, because you may, in practice, when you're doing a big brand rethink, need to look at all three: purpose and proposition and personality. And the weakness of any, what we present in the course is a whole series of models, and a model is a simplified version of reality. And my favorite quote about models is a statistician called George Box, who said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. Reality is always going to be much less tidy than the models that we put forward. But I think if you want to rebuild commitment among your customers, then probably the thing that you have to concentrate on most is your proposition, because that says what it is that those customers get from you. And we're doing a lot of work in Wolf Owners at the moment with companies who've defined their purpose, but need to translate it into something meaningful to customers. It's no good just having an amazing sense of purpose for your own people if that isn't something that is immediately relevant to customers. And my favourite example of this is British Airways, which has and has had for a long time a very clear purpose statement, which is the motto on its logo, which is on its coat of arms, which is to fly to serve. And that's a great thought for the people inside British Airways, but it's not a fantastic thought for customers, because that's what you'd expect. Any airline does that. That's an absolute minimum. An airline that doesn't fly is, kind of, what's the point? And EasyJet, British Airways is one of British Airways' big rivals in Europe, picked that up with a counter campaign. So British Airways was advertising, very expensively advertising, to fly to serve. And EasyJet came back with a campaign that said to fly to save. And that's actually what customers wanted to hear, that they could go somewhere cheaper. Yes. And so I think, and that's the kind of thing that then gets people committed, and people actually become fans of EasyJet. And that would be an example of a proposition that is designed to win commitment from customers.
And I think also that the proposition is something which is relatively easy to change these days, whereas the purpose is something which transcends time almost. Yes. With computer-aided design, computer-aided engineering, computer-aided manufacture, we can actually change our offers to customers fairly quickly in terms of the products and the services. Yep. But actually the purpose behind it and the ethos of the brand, that's something which you don't want to change, because, or at least not very, very, very often, because otherwise people will say, well, what does this company or this brand actually stand for? Exactly. So the proposition, and we can see this in many, many areas, if you look at some brands which have been around for many years, their products change on a regular basis. But actually their purpose perhaps stays the same. I mean, if you look at something like Nike, it started manufacturing sports clothing, sports equipment, but of course it's much more than that with their Nike Plus and their fuel bands and so on. They're actually delivering an experience. That their purpose hasn't changed too much. Their slogan, just do it, hasn't changed that much. But the products and the offerings, the propositions to the customers changed considerably away from selling products we make to delivering experiences.
Great. Very good. Okay. Well, it's now 27 minutes past, so we're coming up to, we've got about 15 minutes to run. We've got some questions now that are about the course. I just want to explain a little bit about the course that Peter and I teach here at UEA, and then we're going to invite a couple of students in. So, oh, no, that's not doing what it should do. Hey, Peter's got the knack for that. If some of you future learners are interested in building a career in branding, we just wanted to introduce you to the course that we teach here, because it could be the perfect springboard for you. And just to say just a little bit about, Peter, thank you, the amazing year that people have here, working with a bunch of very motivated students, small class teaching, which I think people really value. And it's not just classes as well. We do a lot of visits and master classes, all sorts of things. In fact, all of the students came down to see us in Wolf Olins in London last week. And what you get out of it is, yes, a degree, an MSc in brand leadership, the only degree in brand leadership in the world, but you also get a network of friends for life. So I might try this. And enjoy that. It's very much a joint venture between UEA and, in particular, Wolf Olins. I happen to sit in both those camps. Plus, now an amazing range of corporate friends and family. This is just a small selection of the companies, the brands that get involved in the course, welcoming us for visits or teaching masterclasses or mentoring the students, all sorts of ways in which these companies and many others get involved. And I think this kind of depth of engagement with the branding industry is probably unique in the world. I think
so, yes. I mean, and it's joyful as well, on both sides. People like coming and engaging with the students, and students love engaging with the branding world.
Right. I think that's right. So these are some of the topics that we teach, and of course in a year we're able to go much broader than the 6-week online course can. We go much more deeply into strategy and innovation, all those sorts of things. We touch on them in the Future Learn course, but we are able to go into them much more deeply and have a good look at the role of brand in society. And go much more deeply into personal branding. That's the Brand Me module. And students do a really quite serious piece of research, creating a dissertation in the summer. And we've had dissertations in the past that have uncovered, I think, really important things about brands and how they work.
And I think to add to that, I mean, if you do a good dissertation, you could use it as a calling card with a brand agency.
Absolutely.
We've had a student who emailed both Robert and I on Friday to say he'd been made 2 job offers, and as part of those offers, they were based on the work he'd done with his dissertation.
There we are. And I think the way that students go on to get amazing jobs is one of the things that is, for us, is most exciting about the course as the teachers. And you can see behind us on the screens some of the companies that brand leadership students are now working at in senior and important roles. So as a springboard into a career in branding, this course does seem to work. And is 4 examples. I'm not going to read all of these out, but students who've gone on to amazing jobs, and this presentation, by the way, is in step 4.2, so you can have a look at it. I think this is the point to bring in Lydia and Nathan, if you'd like to come and join. So thank you very much. Come and sit down. So Lydia is from Mexico. Nathan is from England. Students on the current course, which has been going for what, 6 weeks now, something like that. Okay, so we're still fairly early on in the year. Now we're happy. We've got 10 minutes or so left to run. Happy to answer any questions about the course. Do you have one there, Peter?
Yes, I had one from Eleanor in London, who's very much interested in the full-time course and simply asks about what funding is available. I think I can just very quickly answer that.
We're going straight to the money then.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, get to the bottom line straight away. We do have a range of scholarships and bursaries to help people who want to take the course, and I'll just refer you to the website where we've got full details of funding and any support that we can offer.
So the answer is there is.
Yes,
frankly, this is not the cheapest course in the world, but that's because there's a lot of value in it.
Absolutely.
A lot of additional value.
And I think when you look at the employment statistics for the graduates from the course, it's not only the benefit that you get of the knowledge on the course, but also the doors that are open to you afterwards.
Yeah. But behind the headline fee on the website, there is a lot of financial support available.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. So now I have a question from Simon. How many years have you been running the full master's course? What have previous students gone on to do? Well, we've run it now for 5 years. So this is year 6. And I think you can see behind us some of the things that students have gone on to do. One of my favourite stories actually isn't any of the people behind here, but a student a couple of years ago who is now head of marketing at a big law firm, which for reasons of confidentiality, I think we can't name. But going back to the question earlier on from Steve about B2B branding, she's transforming. This is very much B2B branding, kind of law firms speaking to other corporations. She is leading a huge rebranding project at that company, working with a branding agency, not Wolf Owners in this case, but another branding agency that is involved in the course, with somebody who's actually a mentor on the course. So she's kind of using her network in all sorts of ways to do something that I'm sure will be fantastic for her firm, but also amazing for her CV, her resume. Lydia, tell us a bit about why did you choose this course, and what has it been so far?
I chose it because I found it really unique, and also I am a graphic designer. So as a graphic designer, I wanted to know more about brands, not only like the image or the logo, but also to go beyond, to know more about the target and to know more about what they stand for, and
Yeah.
I've been enjoying this course a lot.
So, and that's not that unusual. We have about 20 students every year, and every year there are 3 or 4 people who are designers by background, which is fantastic for us because it means that we can do, in teams, we can do really good creative
Yes.
work. But I think your interest in digging behind the design part into the strategy part of branding is not unusual, and this is a really good way to become to multiply your skills, so you can do the strategy as well as the design. Yeah. Okay. Nathan, what about you? Because your background is politics. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's right. I've just graduated from a politics degree here at UEA. And while I was doing that degree, I did some work as a student ambassador and met some of the past students who I think graduated from the course a couple of years ago. And basically they kind of sold me the course, really. So yeah, it's a good story. They were just in the middle of writing their dissertations towards the end of the year, and were just telling me about how much they'd learn. And I think I was at a point where I was just coming towards the end of my second year and thinking, well, what am I going to do next? And in some ways, doing a politics degree, all I'd decided is that I didn't want to go into politics. So helped me choose that, but not much else. And just hearing about the course and looking it up online and stuff like that just really captured my interest, I suppose. And I felt like it was something that I could see myself, in a career in, and just the importance of it as well. And just felt like, because I didn't have any business background or anything, I'd have to do something that would, open those doorways, like we've been saying, be a springboard. So for me, this is just the perfect opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and it doesn't require any huge business knowledge, does it, to do? But of course, branding is political in the sense that branding seeks to change people's ideas and behaviour in the same way that politics does. So there is a big overlap between the two. And I think one of the things we're really keen to teach in much more detail on the full-time course than we can on the Future Learn course is the ethical dimension of branding and the responsibility that we all have if we work in branding to use it as a force for good rather than for evil. Okay, we've got another 5 minutes or so. Do we have any more questions either for the students or on the course or on branding in general? Nothing more coming through? Okay.
I think just picking up on one of the points you were alluding to there, Robert, in terms of experience and so on, we had a real mix of students coming on the course, so it doesn't really matter too much about what background you come from. I think what's really important is to have a passion for the subject and interest in the subject. Last year we had 22 students on the course, and I think the average age was 27. So we had some people who were sort of straight out of university, but also some people who've been working in industry and in practice for a long time. And it makes for a really joyful mix of students. And we take students from all over the world. This year we've got 19 students. They come from 11 different countries. So it's a wonderful cosmopolitan mix.
Indeed.
And everyone's got their own stories to tell. So I think I hope they learn a little bit from me and a little bit from you, Robert, but they also learn a lot from each other.
Absolutely, more from each other. I think that's right. Okay, well, I guess I need to start getting ready for, because I'm teaching this afternoon. Hope you've done your project homework. Very good. Okay, so I'll be teaching that in an hour and a half or so. But I think probably, unless anybody's got any more questions to ask, we will bring this webinar to a close. Thank you very much for taking the time to join in, and thank you very much for your questions, and thanks to Lydia and to Nathan.
Thank you.